Nothing Personal starts in 30 seconds. It's just business. This is Nothing Personal.
Here you go.
Bar. That's the Nothing Personal word of the day. It's Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. And we were talking before we hit go here about setting the bar too high, which is what Paul Skenes is doing right now. The number one pitcher, the Cy Young Award favorite, getting ready for his opening day start, first opening day start of his career, because it's his first opening day in Miami against the Marlins and Sandy Alcantara. And we were trying to figure out if setting the bar is to do with high jump or is it to do with pole vault? What exactly bar are we talking about? The reason I said pole vault, and I'm just curious what you all think. Let me know if you're on the Nothing Person with David Samson chat right now. That means you're listening live to the show, and we're live. But I am curious, but I can't think of anything other than pole vault when it comes to bar, and it obviously has to do with the video that we've all seen about the man who couldn't clear the high jump because of various sizes of his bar. Paul Skenes is leading the show because baseball is starting in 2 days. And I wanted to bring to your attention what it means when a player like Paul Skenes is forced to be in a position of leadership at a really young time in his career. And that yesterday, when he came out and talked about his feeling about himself, the expectations he has on himself. He talked about the city of Pittsburgh, how much he feels he and the Pirates owe to the city of Pittsburgh. He talked about his exhaustion in having Pittsburgh celebrate Sid Bream, Dave Parker going into the Hall of Fame, Bonds, Van Slyke, Leland, choose it, however you want to choose it. He feels as though that the golden era of the Pirates in the past needs to be in the past, and he needs to lead this team into the now and the future. Very difficult to have a young player be forced to take that position. Paul Skenes, Rookie of the Year. Paul Skenes, second in Cy Young. Paul Skenes, who came up with all of these expectations and performed absolutely to those expectations during his stint last year in the big leagues. But now he's a full-time, every 5-day, no innings limit pitcher. And the question is, are we at the point now where we can say that he's the best pitcher in baseball? The problem with giving that mantle to a second-year pitcher is that when you're in the clubhouse, when you get to know these players and you get to know and understand how they feel about their own expectations, you really are forced into a position to manage each type of personality differently, which is what you should do in your company, in your life. You can't treat everybody the same. There are some players who can actually thrive under the burden of expectations, but there are equally those players who wilt under those same expectations. And you've got scouts and you've got development people and managers, coaches, GMs, even team presidents who are trying to guess in advance what type of player an individual is going to be, the wilter or the thriver. Paul Skenes said that I am given my expectations and given other people's expectations of me through the betting markets as established by DraftKings and others, or just by the people in media who are going through expectations for the season, making their predictions, which incidentally will be me tomorrow giving you a full preview of what's going to happen or what I perceive will happen during the season. But he said, if anything, it would be pitching down to other people's expectations the way I think about it. The expectations I have for myself, he said, different than what everybody else outside has, and everybody else outside doesn't matter. And what I love about that is that everybody outside has expectations that are to the moon and that are incredibly likely unrealistic. And so what he's saying is that he's ahead of that. He's above that. And that gives me pause. And not pause about him as a player, not pause about him as a person, but pause about what Derek Shelton, his manager, or Huntington, his general manager, what they have to do to get the most out of him. Because it's the wilters who I've seen more often. It's those who come in with this huge burden and they've got a bad start. They have a bad stretch at the plate. And all of a sudden they start wilting, meaning they get off social media, meaning they don't talk to the media as much, meaning they don't talk to their teammates as much, meaning there's more tension in between starts or before games during BP. If it's a position player, you see the player pressing. There's several types of pressing players, like there's several types of pressing people. When you've got someone on the edge of making a team, there's sort of a 4A player. They're not as good to be a major leaguer. They're too good to be a AAA player. They're called a 4A player. We often see those players press, and that manifests itself in not having patience at the plate, not trusting your stuff, and not throwing the proper pitches and the proper counts, not sticking to the game plan, trying to come out and just overpower people with your four-seamer, two-seamer, either way. Pressing often leads to negative results. And so we will get the psychologist involved and we'll talk to the player about, listen, you don't worry about our job, which is putting the roster together or putting a rotation together. Just worry about you as the player, being the best player you can be, knowing you can't control what we do. Paul Skenes, in his quotes, is saying, I'm not going to worry about what anyone else says because I'm going to be harder on myself than anyone. But we're all being super hard on him. So but just by making him the favorite to win the Cy Young. So if he actually is going to be harder on himself than we are, that could be a prescription for failure. It could be a prescription for injury. So if I am the Pirates and I read these quotes, and they don't have the veterans in the clubhouse to deal with this, Brian Reynolds, in theory, could deal with this. It can't be De La Cruz, but it doesn't matter, whoever it may be. My thought is this. It could be Andrew McCutchen. My thought is that I'm talking to Paul Skenes today. We're still 2 days before his start, and I'm sitting him down to say, I read what you said. I love that you want to be this type of leader, but from our standpoint in the front office, we love you just the way you are. We don't need you to take on that extra responsibility. We want you to actually focus on taking the ball every 5 days and making it through an entire season, 30-plus starts, approach 200, if not surpass 200 innings, and then the chips will fall where they do. I hope the Pirates are taking care of Paul Skenes. He deserves to be taken care of. He is practically already the face of baseball, at least not in Japan. So it is going to be interesting to watch as his season develops. Coke, I had a text exchange yesterday with an old player I used to have named Andrew Miller. I hadn't spoken to Andrew in a while. People may only think of Andrew Miller as the player who we traded for when we traded Miguel Cabrera. And you would be woefully underestimating who he was at the time as a tall lefty throwing 98 starter that was a unicorn, but I digress. You may be focused on him and think he had a decent career, but certainly did not live up to the expectations. And that may be how you associate him. I now associate him as a special assistant for strategic initiatives with the Major League Players Association. Andrew Miller is now part of the Players Union, the dark side. You know I'm kidding, Andrew. It's important to have smart people on both sides, smart people who understand issues on both sides. The reason that I wanted to be in touch with Andrew yesterday is that he was on the Foul Territory podcast. I've been on that. It's a fantastic podcast. Feel free to check it out if you're not already. And he talked a lot about salary caps and salary floors. And nothing personal aficionados, loyal, longtime listeners know that I have covered this topic in detail, in that already, with the season just starting now, 2025. We have a whole nother season to go, 2026, before there will be a work stoppage, before we will have the expiration of the current collective bargaining agreement. But what's happening now is that union and league, union and commissioner, they are giving, union commissioner and owner, they are giving sound bites. They are setting their positions in the public sandbox. Only a few weeks after Dick Monfort, the owner of the Rockies, joined David Rubenstein, who is the owner of the Orioles, as salary floor and salary cap hawks, saying that's the only way to do it. And they brought in Bob Castellini for good measure of the Reds. It took only a few weeks to get the union to unleash Andrew Miller, to give you, the public, the audience, the other side. Keep in mind, when owners or players talk to the media, they're not talking to other owners or players. They're talking to you. They're trying to win in the court of public opinion, in the PR wars. The players find out the position of the commissioner and the owners directly from the commissioner and his negotiating representatives and the owners. There is nothing that is read in the paper that the union says, oh, I didn't realize owners were thinking about that. And similarly, there is nothing that people in the union say publicly that the commissioner says, holy crikeys, it didn't even occur to me that the players union is against a cap and a floor. So Andrew Miller went public yesterday on this great podcast, and he wanted you to understand that salary caps and salary floors will in no way impact competitive balance. Thinking that owners are only trying to institute salary cap and salary floor in order to effectuate competitive balance. And Andrew's reasoning was dynasties. He talked about the Patriots, the Warriors, the Chiefs. He didn't mention the Astros. But those dynasties happen to be in leagues that already have a salary cap. And his hypothesis was that if there's a salary cap in baseball, there could still be dynasties. And so therefore, competitive balance would not be a variable that you've solved for. But of course, that was missing a point. The point of owners in baseball wanting a salary cap and a salary floor is that what owners are trying to do is not improve competitive balance. They're trying to rein in non-competitive spending. That is the reason you have a cap. The reason that you have a floor is that you know the union will never agree to a cap without a floor, but a floor from an ownership perspective is way more complicated than a cap. Right now, you've already got 23 votes for a salary cap in baseball. You will not find an 8-team coalition that would be with the Dodgers and the Mets fighting a cap. The problem is those same 23 who are willing to vote for a cap are unwilling to include a floor without some sort of financing arrangement that would pay for those teams, whether it's the Marlins, the A's, the Guardians, pick your team. In order for them to hit a floor, they'd have to be receiving even more money from other teams, either through revenue sharing or discretionary fund allocations, whatever the case may be. But it makes perfect sense why the union would try to frame it as, hey, fans, if these owners ever say to you publicly that they want a salary cap because they want competitive balance, just know they're lying. But the PR people for the commissioner are better than that. When they're trying to get people to be on their side, to sway public opinion, their bigger point is they're talking to you, the fans, directly saying, don't you feel like you want to have hope? Don't you want to feel like you have a chance every single baseball season? And the irony is the union and the league will use the same stats. Hey, the Yankees haven't won except once since 2000. The Dodgers have won twice. The Mets have never won since 1986. Of course, they're talking about World Series. But the hope that fans need going into a season starting in 2 days from now is the hope that there's an opportunity for everything to go right and for that team to be successful. But every sport, every year, cap, no cap, doesn't matter. You will have a number of teams on the bottom who have zero hope. They will not make the playoffs. The Marlins, the Rockies, the White Sox, they're in a position where their fan base goes into the season understanding the reality. The reality is there's no October. On the other side, you could have the Dodgers at a number of minus 2,500 according to DraftKings right now. Odds subject to change, obviously. Yes, they are a sponsor, full disclosure. But you could have the Dodgers at minus 2,500, and you would think that in the Dodgers clubhouse, what they're saying is, hey, we're good to go. We're guaranteed to make the playoffs. But they're not, and they know it. While they may have the highest win total in baseball and the highest, longest odds, the shortest odds to win the division and make the playoffs, baseball is the type of sport that if their rotation goes down, Betts doesn't recover, Freeman gets hurt or becomes ineffective, you're looking at a team that was built to win 117 games to break the record. But if they won 88 games and didn't make the playoffs, it would be dismissed as a bad season. It would be dismissed as underachieving, but that possibility exists. So what we have to do when we're listening to the rhetoric that's going to come out of the union and it's going to come out of the commissioner's office is you always have to go back and think about why. What is the purpose of what's being said? For Andrew Miller, the purpose was simple. We are going to make it clear to our constituents and the people and the audience, the fans, the world, that we don't want you to mistakenly believe that when the owners ask for a cap or a floor, they are asking for hope. The Pohlad family is hoping to get $1.7 billion for their team. And there was a lot of attention that was brought to this yesterday. And I want to again explain it to you because I want you to get it right. There was a conversation that people inside the Twins organization, meaning only the Pohlads, that they want $1.7 billion for their team. And don't worry that it's a team that was bought in 1984 by Carl Pohlad. Carl Pohlad, who at the time was the richest owner in sports when I got into baseball in 1999, and his team was still going to get contracted because they couldn't find the new stadium, which of course they have now. Don't start doing ROI calculations to see whether or not spending $44 million in 1984, what would that be worth today if you didn't buy a baseball team? And for the love of God, please don't focus on the fact that they have $425 million of debt, which according to multiple people is one of the highest figures in MLB's 30 teams, because that is incorrect. Teams have a ton of debt, whether it's acquisition debt, which is the money you borrow before you buy a team, or if it is operating debt, Seasonal debt, operating debt, is what you need to run a team that loses money. You need to borrow money in order to pay your obligations in a losing operation. $425 million in debt on an asset worth $1.7 billion. Let's just do the math on your house, if you don't mind. If you own a house for $500,000 and you have debt on that house of about between $100,000 and $150,000, do you view that as having a really good equity position in your house? Do you view that as over leveraged and overwhelmed and being forced into foreclosure? No, you don't. $425 million is under. It's about, actually, it is exactly, call it 25% of 1.7. 25% on a house at 500,000 is about 125,000 of mortgage. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts that the majority of people have a mortgage above 125,000 for a $500,000 house when they first started. The reason why this is getting attention is that Matt Ishbia and his brother have passed on the Twins. The Twins said they would expect a transaction by the beginning of the season. It clearly didn't happen. And baseball now is facing a situation where there's a bunch of teams where owners wanted to sell and they didn't pull the trigger. Angels, Nationals, Twins. Just off the top of your head, teams that were for sale that did not sell. Is that because there is such a difference between what an owner thinks his team is worth and what the market thinks his team is worth? Is it because of the disruption in the cable regional sports network business that is causing guaranteed flows of revenue to become non-guaranteed? One of the unintended consequences of what the commissioner has done on the TV side by divorcing ESPN, by getting everybody to do short-term broadcast deals that all expire at once after 2000, many after this season, but certainly all of them by the time the national deals expire, so that the commissioner can do an all-in negotiation for local and national rights. It's the right plan. However, it has had a quashing impact on franchise valuations in the current day, and it has caused a major gulf of America between teams and what the owners think they're worth and what the open market thinks they're worth. Because if you can't count on TV broadcast local revenue, which to date has been a huge component of a team's revenue, then you will have a hard time figuring out what offer you should be making at all. So the real story of the Pohlad family seeking 1.7, not getting it, is not the amount of debt they have. It's about what it means to the industry that teams keep not getting what they want. Frankly, there hasn't been a team to get what it wants since 2017, when the Marlins got exactly what they wanted for their team. And instead of serving as a huge indicator of what that will mean, it's ended up being an interesting case study in franchise valuations. I would tell you that going forward, you're going to hear, and sources have told, that the Pohlads are not under any pressure. That is page 3 of the playbook. When a seller doesn't get a price, let's go back to your home. When you don't have to sell your home and you put it on the market because you want to sell it because you're moving, but you don't have to sell it and you don't get the price you want, you take it off the market and you don't say why. When you have to sell something, no matter what the price is, because you have a timing issue, it doesn't matter if you don't get your ask, you're going to take the highest bid and consummate the transaction. Make no mistake, the Pohlad family does not need to sell the Twins today. However, wait to see. When we tell you something's going to happen, if it does, great. If it doesn't, fine. Coca, we have a wait to see right now on the Minnesota Twins. The Minnesota Twins will have an agreement in place to sell their team prior to the start of next season. Wait to see. All right, Coca. Play me some music, please.
You know what I want? I want to talk to Samson.
So you want to talk to Samson? Get into my X at David P. Samson. Of course, you can go to davidsamsonpodcast.com, ask a question, just like the character from Half Baked. David, are you excited? Well, I'd like to answer that question. No, I'm just kidding. That's not the whole question. But I am excited. You seem so today on the show. This was yesterday. Just over 2 days until opening day. Did you read what the Red Sox are doing? Seems the opposite of the Giants. And both those teams are operated by former players. Please discuss. I'll hang up and watch. Well, I appreciate you asking. And not only are those teams run by players, you've got the Giants who have Buster Posey in charge, and you've got the Red Sox who have Craig Breslow in charge. I've had Craig Breslow as a player on my team. Craig Breslow is a Yelly. He's brilliant. But Posey and Breslow are doing things very, very differently. Craig Breslow spoke to The Athletic. The Athletic did a whole story about Craig Breslow and his operation of the Red Sox and the changes he's made in the front office. And he has acknowledged that he is extremely analytic and that for purposes of ease of this conversation, he is very much on one extreme, which fits very well with his principal owner, John Henry, who has made his money with analytics, but in the stock market, not in the baseball world. Though I could argue he's done very well in his sports properties. However, when you have an owner that is that analytic and you have a GM who comes in who is that analytic, that is called job preservation. That is called doing something smartly because your owner wants you to do it that way. But it causes an issue. And the issue that it causes was discussed briefly in the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. But the issue is that if you've got a whole staff of people who are both analytic and I as in EYE, they use their eyes. They want to lay eyes on a player, understand his heart, understand his plan, his drive, understand his propensity to wilt or thrive. Analytics doesn't allow for any of that. They discount it. They discount it almost like a carbon half-life to zero. Craig Breslow took this approach and decided this is the right way to do it. And my approach has led to the signing of Walker Buehler, the extension of Matt Chapman, bringing in free agents Aroldis Chapman and Alex Bregman. Excuse me. Thank you. Matt Chapman is the Giants. No, Aroldis Chapman is who I said. Did I say Matt? Sorry, Coca. I meant Aroldis Chapman, the flamethrower. He's the one on the Red Sox. I'm talking about the Giants next, and I've got a Chapman, but that's Matt Chapman. It is Bregman, Crochet, Buehler, Aroldis. The flamethrower still throws 98, but he's a little wild. His ERA isn't 0. It used to be, and he's sort of an average bullpen guy now because it's no longer exciting to throw a $1.02 when everyone's throwing that. Those are interesting players to sign when you are solely an analytic team and you fired basically a third of your scouting department, development department, have tremendous turnover, and you have created a new Red Sox front office in the true image of you and your owner. What you really are saying is that you're pretty much like everybody else. You want to get a young performing pitcher before arbitration, Crochet. You want to see if you can get a bounce back candidate, Buehler. You want to throw in a bullpen guy that if it works, great. If not, you can jettison him, Chapman. And you want to sign a free agent so you can quiet your fans who are despondent that you've lost 2 or 3 years in a row where you haven't even hit 500, haven't made the playoffs. So you bring in the name, the cream of the crop in the free agent market. There's nothing analytic about the Red Sox decisions this offseason. As a matter of fact, it is extremely right down the middle. It's like checking the box of what you do with an unhappy fan base. So while you can write an article or you can position yourself as holier than thou, smarter than thou, which seems to be something pervasive throughout the Red Sox system. However, all of that said, you can do it. But your actions are indicating you're just like everybody else. You feel the pressure of the fans. You feel the pressure of the underperforming and what that means to your owner. And you're going to put together a team where you get some PR that, hey, looks like the Red Sox are back. Looks like they're going for it. Looks like this is their year. And then, of course, all of the analytics that you use so much of say that you're going to win 86 and a half games. Now, it is true that the Red Sox are in a position where they've got a great minor league system. They've got great young players coming up. That is something that all teams strive for, analytic or non-analytic. You want overperforming young players. That is the way to win. I just don't want you to be fooled thinking that that is all the Red Sox are, because it's not. Just like I don't want you to be fooled thinking that Buster Posey in his new role as president of baseball operations, that he also has decided to do something strange, which is get away from analytics and just go ahead and sign Verlander or Adames or extend Matt Chapman. Buster Posey went out of his way to let you know that he wants to do it the old-fashioned way. He said he's going to deviate from the analytical roster building approach that's overtaken the industry. He wants to build a team based on community, based on players, the way it's been in the previous decade. Posey then said my favorite line, hey, I'm in the memory-making business. Let's go make some memories, with an over-under of 80 and a half. The irony of Buster Posey doing that is that his team is coming off a highly analytic former head of baseball ops, a guy named Farhan, who is now, he got a new job back with, I want to say back with the Dodgers, but I could be wrong, Coca. They were hugely analytic, but their ownership group is the type of group where they have something else in mind, not the success of their team on the field. What they have in mind is the development they're trying to do, and eventually the renovations that they're going to need to do to what once was a brand new Pac Bell that is now an aging AT&T. So when you see GMs come out and talk about how they are, just remember, every good president of baseball ops or GM is going to give you a bit of everything. They can't be too far on one side because it doesn't work. And every team actually knows that, but they try to manipulate and spin in order to give you, the audience and fans, the impression that they're doing it in a way that will make you proud, doing it in a way that will make themselves look smart. But guess what? They'll be judged over the next 162 by me, by you, and by the owners. All right, let's take a break, Coco. We come back. We're going to review a movie. Then we got to talk about something non-sports related, but hang in there with me. Hang in there with me. You won't be sorry. Do not get into the transfer portal of podcasts. Please. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. This is David Samson. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get right into a topic right now, and that is something that happened outside the sports world. There was a very strange thing that happened with an app called Signal that those of you in the business of secrecy may know. Those of you in the business of, hey, I want to talk to somebody that I don't want anyone to know who I'm saying, what I'm saying, or where I'm saying it. That's an app, a semi-secure app of secrecy that's used by journalists and people alike. A story came out yesterday that there was a problem with our Secretary of Defense who sent a text to the editor of The Atlantic. And in the text on Signal, It talked about what the U.S.'s defense plan was in an attack against rebels in Yemen, an attack that happened earlier this month. It turns out that Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was by accident added to a group chat. And in the group chat was the Vice President, J.D. Vance, the Secretary of Defense, and other people who had operational responsibilities when it came to the security of our nation. And Jeffrey Goldberg did what all journalists would do. He wrote a story about it. And it has created an absolute maelstrom of crap, confirmation bias of both sides of the aisle. Hillary Clinton telling you, hey, listen, my private email server cost me the presidency. Now we've got the current president who is either not knowing what his people are doing, or his people are doing something so patently irresponsible that it is impacting our country and the safety of our country. Let me stop you there. If you think for 1 minute that since the advent of the text, that it was West Wing-like in the current administration or the past administration, whether it's Republican or Democrat, you are sorely mistaken. How do you communicate? You're communicating stuff that's pretty important. You're communicating via text. You're communicating via email. You're communicating via what you hope is secure, because WhatsApp promises, Signal promises, iMessage promises, but no. At the end of the day, what are you actually hoping for? You are hoping that if you email somebody, that they'll read what it says and they'll delete it and maybe even forget about it. You got to stop. You've got to be in a position where whatever you are texting, you have to assume will end up on the front page of the paper. That's been a lesson that was taught to me 25, 35 years ago. I was in law school, for crying out loud. You do not say anything to anyone in a meeting. You don't write anything to anyone. I don't care how secure. You don't tell something to your partner, your lover, your spouse. You think that there's such thing as the perfect vault? It doesn't exist. The perfect vault is saying something to yourself. The imperfect vault, but close enough to as good as it's going to get, is having a group of people who you believe have your back. Do you think that every time you tell something to your group of best friends, hey, do me a favor, don't tell anyone. Hey, keep it to yourself. Hey, I'm telling you this secret. You understand that the odds are overwhelming that somebody is sharing that with somebody else within a cone of silence? And if you create a cone of silence made up of more than one person, do you think it's anything unlike what you've seen this season in The White Lotus, where 3 middle-aged, gorgeous women get together, and when there's only 2 of them, they're talking about the third best friend? This is normal. But the reason why it is of concern to me is that once it came out and once it happened, what the current administration is saying is, hey, that guy at The Atlantic, what a jack. What a jackhole. He has nothing. He doesn't know anything. He's a terrible journalist. That is not of interest. What is interest is that we need to understand why we would have an administration that wouldn't say, shucks. We've all done that. We've all, by accident, sent a text to the wrong person, put someone in the wrong text chain. Idiots. We're going to do better next time. The reality is that the most secretive of conversations that happen at the top level of governments, they are happening in person. What is being texted is communication. It is confirmation. It is the beginning of strategy, the middle of strategy, the end of strategy. It's been going on for administrations. I'd like everyone just to take a step back and cool down and not come to the conclusion that, hey, what Trump's people did all of a sudden makes him the single most irresponsible leader in the free world. Nor would I like you to be, if you're anti-Trump, to say, I told you so, look what happened now. Remember, We did an entire story this week or last week about the former Michigan staffer Matt Weiss, the guy who just pled not guilty yesterday. What he was accused of was going into hacking every system to get pictures of women and athletes. Just know that if you want to be in a cabin in the woods and alone, and you want to be cut off from the world and not engage in any internet use or in any conversations of any kind with more than one person, that is your only protection that you have 100%. We've got laws that enable you to feel that you will be protected by the law. You will be protected by people having to do what's right and moral and ethical and legal. And when they don't and we catch them, they're going to be punished. But it doesn't change the reality of what the hack is or what the breach of security is. Nothing. Personal pick of the day. Lakers minus 4.5 over Magic. Me telling you that LeBron and the Lakers would rebound from a terrible loss. The Lakers stink. They lost by 12. All I thought of was Nico, the GM of the Mavericks, saying, wow, I love that we won yesterday. Anthony Davis is back, and that Luke is so inefficient, shooting 9 for 23, that LeBron is 40 years old and going a minus 17 when he's in the game, even though he did shoot 9 for 18 and had a good overall game. The Lakers just got whooped by a better team, the Magic. And what an epiphany for me to realize the Lakers are the Lakers, which they're not nearly good enough in the West. Not even close. We have a super fun game coming tonight in Miami. Jimmy Butler's coming home. Jimmy Butler gave a quote yesterday that, as a Heat fan, you ought to be bothered by. Jimmy Butler said, yeah, just another game. Don't care. Don't even think about them. Rear view mirror. It's like I wasn't even there. He was in the finals 2 years ago, had one of the great 5-year runs of any Heat player, but it ended the way things end with Jimmy. And now the Warriors are playing great with Jimmy, and it's not even the playoffs yet. Even though Coca, that great full court shot during practice by Steph Curry that we thought swish did not actually go in. I got totally fooled by the internet, which really stinks. The Warriors are in a position where this is a game where Draymond Green said it's critical for the Warriors because we want to win it for Jimmy, just like they want to win it for Andrew Wiggins. And I say, what a bunch of crap. Players don't actually care about that inside the clubhouse. They don't go around when a player's going back to a team he used to be on and walk around saying, we got your back. We're going to play harder tonight because we want you to get a win against your former team. It never comes up. That said, the Warriors are 5-point favorites over the Heat. The Heat finally broke their 10-game losing streak by beating a crappy team. The Warriors are not that. The Warriors should comfortably cover this spread. I actually thought it was going to be more in the 7.5 to 8 range, but we will take the Warriors -5 over the Heat. What number did you have for the transfer portal yesterday? The transfer portal opened in basketball yesterday, college basketball. I want to talk more about the NCAA transfer portal because having thought about it and spent time listening to Coca and his views, I've come to a conclusion. The system we have stinks. The transfer portal that we all tried to fix by giving free agency to players and allowing for NIL money to go to players has not had the benefits that you thought it would have. It is not players jumping for joy, grabbing all of the money and saying, finally, we're being paid for all of the great work we do for your conference, your university, and for your barely endowed science chair over on Science Hill. When you've got over 700 players that join the transfer portal, which is up from a record 291 last year, which was up from a record 175 in 2023, why is it you think the numbers keep climbing? Why is it that you think that there are players sitting on the bench of teams that are still involved in the NCAA tournament who are saying, hey, I'm not really happy at this school. It's not about the coach. It's about my playing time. Wouldn't that be amazing if players were in the portal because of playing time? Players are in the portal because they don't get the amount of money they think they deserve, or their agents or families told them they're going to get when they become college athletes. You get in the portal for the sole purpose of negotiating a different amount of money more than a current team is paying you. It shouldn't be a surprise to you that the top player in transfer is a UNLV player, and UNLV came out and said, hey, we can't even pay our coach. Forget playing Thomas. So here's the solution that we're going to focus on. We're going to make it so that John Skipper isn't right. We're going to make it so that we don't do power conferences only. We're going to make it so that there are Cinderellas that can win in the NCAA tournament. And we're going to level the playing field here, because NIL sure as heck fire didn't do it, and it's not going to do it. And neither will the transfer portal. We're going to make it so that if you take someone out of the portal, you have to pay the team that loses the player. We're going to institute something called transfer fees. We're going to make it just like soccer. If you need to raise money for your team because you're short, or you really prefer STEM research and you want to sell a player, you can sell a player. The player can cut a deal with a team, and then you get a fee. It happens with Japanese in the posting system. Now, is it true that certain teams can pay more transfer fees than others? Yeah, but it won't matter actually, because we're not allowing the fees to be paid for the high school players. We're only allowing NIL to be paid to college players. And then if you lose a college player because he wants to transfer for a playing time or for a greener pasture, and the greener pasture only comes from one of the power conferences, okay, we're going to make sure we pay the other 26 Division I conferences in basketball for losing players the way I wanted to be paid when I lost a player to free agency because I couldn't afford that player. In baseball, we get paid through a pick. No, I want hard, cold cash. And this doesn't mean I want to become Charlie Finley. This doesn't mean that I am allowing or suggesting that players can be sold. What I am alleging and proposing is that there is a fee structure that is put into place so everyone knows the rule of engagement. And the reality of the fee structure is that dollars are fungible. So if a team wants to acquire a player in the portal, they will calculate how much money they give to that player, plus the amount of fee they have to pay to the team losing that player, and they will then make that the market value for the player they're acquiring. Because at the end, markets tend to correct themselves, and teams tend to value players with their value, and then it doesn't matter how the money's distributed. So if 80% goes to the player and 20% goes to the team, as long as 100% that a acquiring team pays is what that player is worth 100%, then it will be market irrelevant to what the breakout is or how the money is split. How do you get to that point? You have to get to that point with representation, with potential forming of a union with college players, with a set of rules that are agreed to through a governing body that governs all 31 Division I conferences that have men's basketball teams. You have to do it in a way that is honest, even, and that recognizes that there will be differences between certain teams the way there are in life. There's difference in intelligence, there's difference in money, there's difference in experience, in power, in where you live, in what you do. Those differences are to be expected in any society. I'm not asking to have 350 Dukes or 350 North Carolinas. I am asking to have a system where people understand how to play within the rules, and then you pay a premium for people who understand how to get through the loopholes in the rules. And then you've got a governing body that closes the loopholes so people can then focus on creating the new loopholes or taking advantage of new existing as yet undiscovered loopholes. I believe that we are going to get to that point. I believe that it makes perfect sense to me that the way the transfer portal is in the NCAA is not sustainable. It can't be what the conferences had in mind. It can't even be what the super conferences had in mind, because you would have players transferring only in the Super League if only a Super League exists. Players will easily work with staff and agents and universities because they all have the same thought, that it's just business. Good luck in the portal. This is nothing personal.